Let's move on to another story, the GoFundMe story, which is also about power, control, tech, and money. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. A really stunning display. GoFundMe, after raising tens of millions of dollars, not the organization itself, but a petition on the platform for the Canadian trucker convoy, says that no further funds would be distributed directly to the organizers of the Freedom Convoy protests. And the firm specifically said, quote, "We now have evidence from law enforcement that the previously peaceful demonstration has become an occupation." So this is a very important point, Krystal. The Freedom Convoy of the truckers who are originally protesting vaccine mandates, but really more it's become a catch-all for all restrictions in Canada on top of vaccine mandates and restrictions, lockdowns, masks, etc., has become a force where they've occupied, not even occupied, I don't even want to use their language. They have taken up, certain parts of the city. In Ottawa, they're honking their horns. They're getting a lot of community support, both out in the United States, but also within Canada as well, and it's turned into a real grassroots movement. Now, as some grassroots movements, it has raised tens of millions of dollars online, but the Ottawa police and the Canadian government have taken an incredibly hard line against these truckers. Now, there has not been use of force yet, although apparently that, remains in the cards and it is possible, but they've been denounced by the Prime Minister, they've been denounced by the police, they've been accused of, all sorts of things. As usual, the truckers are now racist because one guy had a Confederate flag in the convoy of by the way, we also don't even know yet how big this thing is. Some said 50,000, some said 1,000. Who knows?
It's not 50,000.
It's not 50,000.
It's 1,000.
Yeah, it's more like 1,000 if you take a look at the photo.
The numbers, in terms of participants at the biggest rallies, it was like 8,000.
That's right.
In terms of number of trucks, it was in the hundreds to maybe 1,000.
So all of this is really important. But the problem is that this has become now, GoFundMe is the cudgel through which people who are trying to raise money for a cause they believe in, and GoFundMe is supposed to be the platform, is now acquiescing to the demands of law enforcement. That is a terrible standard. Let's put this up there. Which is Ottawa Police puts out a statement, "We want to thank GoFundMe for listening to our concerns as a city and a police service. The decision to withhold funding for these unlawful demonstrations is an important step, and we call on all crowdfunding sites to follow." Now, what did we just talk about in our Rogan block, Krystal? Which is you can live in a free society or we can live in a police state. The definition of a police state is when the police get to decide what cause is worthy and what is not. Now look, Canada, it's not America. They don't have the Bill of Rights, ostensibly free, but a lot more like the Europeans. This is still, though, an American company which masquerades itself domestically as, oh, well, we don't take sides, even though they have in the past. This is the most absolute demonstration that they will listen to people in authority when it's a cause that they don't like, and that they will then use their platform in order to deny a key part of the online fundraising system towards people just because they disagree with their aims. And their justification here could have obviously been used against BLM. It obviously wasn't, right? Those people have raised tens of millions of dollars, and there's a lot of questions about where that money has gone. But the point is that they shouldn't have pulled it from BLM either. They shouldn't pull it from anybody. Anybody should be allowed to raise money here unless it's explicitly violating the whole doxing, the violence, the actual cardinal rules of the internet for when things should get taken down. Absent that, these truckers, they're protesting, okay? Protests, they get to raise money, especially on an American platform like GoFundMe, who's doing this at the behest of the Ottawa police.
I spent a lot of time looking into this one because I think it's a type of story. First of all, we're not there, right?
Yeah,
and we
right.
don't.
It's also not our country.
It's not our country. We're not there. And so I really wanted to spend a lot of time doing research about what is really going on. How's the media portraying it? What are the participants themselves saying? I listened to a lot of audio of people who are involved in it themselves talking about what it's about and how they feel about it. And I think there's a few things that are important to say here. First of all, I don't doubt that if you live in Ottawa, this is a tremendous pain in the ass.
Sure.
Right? I feel total sympathy for you. They're honking their horns all night. It's extraordinarily loud. You're having trouble getting around your city and just living your normal life. I get it. And by the way, I think we can relate to it, having been living here a couple summers ago during the George Floyd protests
and during the inauguration.
And during the inauguration after January 6th. I mean, it just was one thing after another but there were times when, this city was under a military lockdown. down, helicopters circling overhead, every street barricaded with massive military vehicles and Humvees and armed, openly armed soldiers. So I definitely get the frustration of having your normal life disrupted. However, there have been only 3 arrests from this protest. They were for relatively minor infractions, is my understanding, things like property destruction. And I do think that there has been an effort because the cause is broadly unpopular in Canadian society, but I think there has been an effort to use the actions and the language of a few to broadly tar the whole movement. The one Confederate flag is a good example. The one dude who said this is going to be our January 6th is another good example. And from listening to the comments of the people who were involved themselves, which were broadcast by CBC, which has not been very charitable to them, they have been trying to really police their own people. So there were instances of people using Nazi iconography, swastikas, yellow stars, and the like. Now we're saying that they're the Nazis, not that we're in support of Nazis. I have no idea. I do know that that sort of imagery and symbology can be very offensive and it's not helpful to their cause whatsoever. They seem to know that as well and are trying to crack down on that sort of direction. So I don't want to sanitize and say these are all just salt of the earth people. There's no extremist elements or anything like that. But the important thing is that the root of their protest is a legitimate line of debate, which is about whether you agree with them or not. Should we have these vaccine requirements? Should we have these lockdowns? Should we have these mask mandates? We disagree with this and we want to make our voices heard. And frankly, I think that their approach to it has been very creative and has been very effective, certainly in getting people's attention and inspiring people in Canada. But also, obviously, this has been a big story here as well. The reason it's relevant to us is because of the GoFundMe piece. Because this is an American company that is incredibly significant in terms of a fundraising platform. And for them to be able to have the say over who's able to actually raise funds for their cause and who's not, that's where things start to get very uncomfortable. Because again, you're handing over control of society to a few tech oligarchs, letting them say who can have a podcast, who can be on YouTube, who can raise money, funds, who can host on the cloud, who can exist on the App Store. You really are closing off avenues and making it so that there are these incredibly powerful gatekeepers. And once again, if you think this is just going to stay with the right, go ask all the leftists who have been canceled and who have been deplatformed and who've had their podcasts taken down about how that ultimately all works out.
I honestly think it's worse than the tech piece because they didn't take responsibility. They gave it to the cops. They were like, no, the cops say it's bad. You're like, well, okay, so that's the standard? I mean, let's take the logical extrapolation of that in terms of tech people listening then to the law enforcement agencies. You think the FBI doesn't have an interest in taking down this podcast after all the January 6th coverage that we've made here, or the Capitol Police talking about their spying abilities, or the Department of Homeland Security? Luckily, we have the First Amendment. We can say whatever we want, but we don't have a right to be on YouTube. We don't have a right to be on Spotify or whatever. Any of those people could then go ahead and partner with the platform on the cops if they made the request. I'll take it one step further up the tech stack, if you will. Let's say GoFundMe didn't do this. What if Visa and MasterCard and other credit card processors, there's only like 3 or 4 in the entire country, decided they would no longer process transactions at the behest of law enforcement towards the Ottawa truckers? Well, that's pretty scary. And actually, that's already happened in several instances. Now, that was against white nationalists, but the standard has been set, and especially if they use it and listen to the cops, especially in a time of turmoil and protest and occupation, whatever you want to call it, about what's happening. So the point is that these American tech companies are setting the standard of listening to foreign law enforcement. Okay, GoFundMe Hong Kong. What's going to happen? GoFundMe Saudi Arabia. Let's women go ahead and try and start a GoFundMe in Saudi. Boom. Done. GoFundMe Iran, GoFundMe Russia, GoFundMe Ukraine, GoFundMe Germany even, All of these places have outrageous anti-free speech laws. The standard that they're setting is that the locals get to decide what is cool and what is not. Now, okay, that's fine from a democratic sense, but not from an American tech company sense, and especially if they're going to import that standard here to the US. So that's my biggest concern on all of this.
I listened as part of my research for this. I listened to Canadian Broadcasting Corporation podcast that was truly insane. They brought in this woman who's an expert in like terrorism financing.
Oh, good, yeah.
And then she was using all of this language that was plucked straight from Russiagate, talking about, we don't know where these funds are coming from. This is foreign influence in our country. And she wasn't talking about Russia. She was actually talking about the United States.
Yeah, of course.
But it was all like meant to be very nefarious and very sketchy. I mean, first of all, it was just completely invented because she had no idea who gave the money, where the money came from. And so that enabled her to concoct this whole sort of like idea of a nefarious cabal that was supporting this, because it was interesting, her language too, because the reason she first decided to investigate it was because it struck her that it was not likely that they organically raised that much money, which speaks probably to her own bubble of the people that she lives around and the views that they hold, and that they wouldn't be the type that would give to a cause like this. But that's the type of misinformation that's being used, and it's to the point that they're actually going to have like a government hearing and inquiry into the source of the funds and all of this. So that's some of the heat that has been created around this money and where did it come from and what is it going to. So originally GoFundMe was like, we're going to give it to charities. Now they are refunding it to the people involved. But you know, those people who gave that money, they want to support this cause, and they have every right to, whether you like the cause or not. I personally have issues with, you know, the stances they're taking. I have no doubt that there are like, you know, a widespread anti-vax sentiments within the group, but who cares? It's about believing in democracy, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy, believing that people have a right to raise their voice in protest, and that in that give and take, you're going to come to some sort of consensus about what your society is going to look like. And, you know, it's just a sad state of affairs that you have so many people who, again, in another time would be very energized. They would have activist impulses dedicated to, hey, how do we forge a better collective good? How do we stand up against the man? And now what are they spending their energy doing? Like begging tech oligarchs
Please, the man.
to have more, to take more control over society.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.